Today I'm going to be reviewing the second season of The Bad Batch. Those of you who've seen my review of the first season of The Bad Batch will know that I did quite enjoy season 1, and in fact I even did a much longer video going more in depth on all of the episodes. I'll link those in the description if you're interested in checking those out. Anyway, without further ado, let me jump to my thoughts for season 2. So to quickly summarise what happens in the first season, for those who don't remember or need an update, we're introduced to the Bad Batch, who are an elite experimental clone unit that fought for the Republic. Its members included Hunter, who was the leader and has enhanced sensors and tracking abilities. Tech, who is very computer savvy and smart with all that kind of stuff. Wrecker, who is basically the tank, being very strong and favouring explosives and heavy weapons. And Crosshair, who was the sharpshooter. There was also Echo, who used to be a regular clone, but after a near-death experience, he was captured by the Separatists and experimented on. So now he's sort of part machine. The first season sort of explored a few different things, but it followed the Bad Batch as they adapted to the new world following the dissolution of the Republic and the creation of the Empire in its place. Now, most of the Bad Batch ended up separating from the Empire when they were unwilling to target civilians, with the exception of Crosshair, who ended up staying with the Empire. And because of that, he ended up fighting and conflicting with the Bad Batch on numerous occasions. The Bad Batch also took in this young girl who was also a clone named Omega. And she and Hunter sort of share that parent-child dynamic, even though technically they're like siblings, and technically she's older than them. It's weird. But yeah, overall, season 1 followed them as they went on various missions, occasionally ran into the Empire, and eventually culminated in the destruction of Camino and the cloning facilities there. And the Bad Batch end up escaping, but Crosshair chooses to remain behind to rejoin the Empire. Now, season 2 continues on the story. So for our main characters in the Bad Batch, we follow them as they continue to go on missions. A lot of it's pretty standard and not too dissimilar to what happened in season 1. However, there are a few little story threads that sort of go on throughout this season. One of these has to do with Echo. Now, Echo, I sort of talked about this in the first season, but Echo didn't have many good moments, and he was sort of a fairly lackluster character in that season. However, in this season, he gets a bit more development and a bit more focus. Hunter and Echo sort of disagree a little bit throughout the season on what they should be doing. Hunter's wanting them to just keep doing their missions so that they can get enough money to sort of clear off the debt and settle down a bit. You know, he knows that this isn't a life that a kid should have. Echo, however, he sees what the Empire is doing and he wants to fight against the Empire for his brothers. He wants to fight for the clones. There's a few scenes throughout the series where they discuss this, and it's really interesting and gives Echo a lot more character depth than he had in the first season. And this eventually leads to him actually joining up with Rex, which I'll go into more detail about later in this review. So there's a few episodes where he is away from the Bad Batch because he's with Rex. Another character who gets a lot of extra development in this season is Tech. He didn't have that much development in the first season. However, this season, there's a few more episodes that sort of focus on him a bit more, and he gets some pretty good moments with Omega, and there's sort of hints at a potential romance for him. So it's good that he gets a bit more focus in this season as well. And of course, there's Crosshair. Crosshair doesn't appear too frequently in this season. There's 2 episodes dedicated to him, and then he also briefly appears in a couple of the later episodes. But overall, he's not in that many episodes. However, his 2 episodes are without a doubt the best in the show, and they sort of tie into one of the overarching things that is going on throughout this series. And that's the phasing out of the clones. So Crosshair's first episode in this season is called The Solitary Clone. and it basically shows him back with the Empire, and he gets sent to deal with some separatists who are refusing to bow to the Emperor. So he gets put under the command of Commander Cody. So Cody, Crosshair, and a few other clones get deployed to fight separatists, which is really cool because you have clones fighting battle droids and stuff, which is like classic Clone Wars, except now they're under the Empire. It really blurs those lines of Republic and Empire. But this episode is important because it really shows Crosshair's dedication to the Empire. He's loyal to the Empire and he follows orders no matter what. There's a scene at the end of the episode where Cody and Crosshair confront the Separatist governor who has an Imperial officer hostage. She has a discussion with Cody, who eventually agrees to convince her to let the officer go so that they can talk about things. And then once he's freed, the officer orders Cody to shoot her. Cody hesitates because he agreed to, hear her out and help her or whatever. So Crosshair steps in and kills her. This then leads to a scene near the end of the episode. Cody and Crosshair have a brief exchange where Cody asks if they're doing the right thing. And there's this really good line he says where he points out to Crosshair that the thing that makes the clones different from battle droids is that they make their own decisions. After this, Cody ends up going AWOL and we don't see him for the rest of the season. So after setting up this whole thing with Crosshair being loyal to the Empire, we follow that up with an episode much later in the series called The Outpost, which is hands down the best episode in the show. Crosshair gets put under the command of this Imperial officer who just has a disdain for all clones and is just extremely disrespectful towards clones in general. So Crosshair and this officer end up getting assigned to this remote outpost on this snowy planet where they're meant to guard crates. And by the time they get there, there's 3 clones left. They're led by Commander Mayday, who has apparently been requesting reinforcements for quite some time, but the Empire has only now just sent people there. After some bandits attack the base and steal a couple of crates, Crosshair and Mayday get assigned on a mission to go retrieve the crates, and they proceed to track the bandits through a hidden cave and eventually find where the bandits are. Then they end up having a fight with them. They deal with the bandits and then they go to load the crates back up, which is when they discover the contents of the crates and they find it's just equipment for the new TK troopers. There's then this big avalanche which buries them both. But Crosshair manages to break free and he finds Mayday, who insists that he just leave him there. Crosshair, however, refuses and carries Mayday back to the base. There's this great big scene showing him making their way back. When they return, they're met by that officer and Crosshair asks for help for Mayday because he needs a medic and all that. The officer, however, is completely uncaring and unwilling to help. He continues to voice his disdain for clones, and then Mayday ends up dying. The officer sort of puts Crosshair in his place, tells him to get back to work, and begins walking away. And this leads to Crosshair taking matters into his own hands, and he shoots the officer dead. It is a very, very good episode, and it really shows the Empire's disdain for the clones and the way that they're being treated. This season in particular really shows the clones being mistreated. The Empire doesn't care for them, and they're being phased out in favour of the TK troopers and one day stormtroopers. This is something that's also explored pretty well in some other episodes, including the 2-part arc in the middle of the season, Clone Conspiracy and Truth and Consequences, which are interesting episodes that show the Senate, which is pretty cool. So it's kind of reminiscent of those political episodes from the Clone Wars. Essentially, it's about some clones who are demonstrating quite a bit of remorse for what happened to Kamino, and they want to reveal what happened and out Rampart. So the Bad Batch get hired to recover the mission logs from Rampart's cruiser. Overall, they're pretty good episodes. I don't want to go too much into specifics because if I talk about all the episodes, I'll be here all day. but it's another important episode that is sort of starting to show the clones, like the inhibitor chips seem to be sort of wearing off now. Like we already saw a little bit of that in season 1 with Hauser taking a stand against the Empire in that Ryloth episode, but we see more and more of that in this season as well. Clones who are starting to question the Empire, clones who are now going AWOL. And it seems pretty clear that this is all building up towards some kind of clone rebellion. Circling back to what I was saying about Echo earlier, Echo and Rex actually seem to be starting some kind of clone rebellion. Those two have been working with a couple other clones, including Gregor, who you might remember was rescued by the Bad Batch in season 1. These clones have all started taking the fight to the Empire a bit, and they end up rescuing Hauser and a couple of his clones when they were on their way to some facility. This is what ends up leading them to uncover some intel about Crosshair's potential location. And they get a lead on the new villain of the show, who's known as the Doctor. He's sort of taken over as the new main villain of the show because Rampart ends up getting arrested and taken away after it's revealed in the Senate that he was behind the destruction of the Camino. Echo, with this lead, ends up returning to the Bad Batch for them to go on a mission to go put a tracker on this Doctor's ship. So this is something that happens in the 2-part finale for season 2. Now these episodes, they were pretty good and they really raised the stakes pretty high. Essentially the Bad Batch have to infiltrate this base where a bunch of top level Imperial officers are meeting. They're only interested in Dr. Hemlock, I think it is. They're only interested in putting a tracker on Hemlock's ship. They're not really there for anything else. But the plan goes awry when they discover they're not the only people there. Saw Gerrera and some of his men have infiltrated this facility as well, and they have their own mission. They want to blow up the facility and kill all those top level Imperial officers. So Hunter and Saw Gerrera sort of have a bit of a discussion about things, and Hunter urges him to not compromise their mission. But this is when they're discovered by the Empire and they're forced to flee. So the Bad Batch flee and Saw Gerrera also flees and he detonates the explosives. Now the Bad Batch, who were fleeing on this like rail cart basically, end up getting stranded over this incredible height because the power goes out when Saw blows up the facility, or blows up part of the facility I should say. This leads to the Bad Batch getting trapped in a very hairy situation, and they're only able to just barely escape, but it comes at the cost of Tech's life. He has to sacrifice himself to allow the others to escape. So yeah, Saw Gerrera is definitely at fault for that. So fuck that guy. Also, it's worth noting, his mission was a failure. He didn't kill any of those Imperial officers that he was hoping to kill. And because of him, the Bad Batch fail their mission as well. They return to Ord Mantell, but then Sid ends up ratting them out to the Empire. So Hemlock shows up and there's a big altercation, and long story short, Omega gets kidnapped and taken away somewhere. And now we have Hunter, Wrecker, and Echo, who don't know where Omega or Crosshair are. That's where the season leaves us. Quite a downer ending, but it does raise the stakes pretty high. Now, as for Tech's death, it was pretty good. It was pretty emotional. However, this is Star Wars, so is he really dead? Is he going to stay dead? It's unclear. I might potentially go a bit more in depth on that in another video. Maybe. We'll see. But I'm just going to leave it there for now. And yeah, Sid ratting them out, that's another plot line that was sort of built up towards throughout the series. She was never really that trustworthy in the first season. And the start of this season, we get a few hints that she's not that trustworthy. She's got a bit of a criminal past. I mean, she's got a criminal present as well. And the latter part of this season, the Bad Batch actually haven't been doing missions for her because they've been avoiding her. It's definitely something that's built up towards. Now, something I touched on in my review of the first season, and my tier list video as well, was all of the pre-existing characters that were in season 1, because there was a lot. I mean, this season, it still sort of follows that trend. We have a lot of pre-existing characters pop in. Off the top of my head, we have Gunji, one of the Jedi younglings from the Clone Wars. Director Krennic has a cameo. I mentioned Saw Gerrera comes back for a bit. Tarkin's also in it. The Emperor has a cameo. We actually have Senator Tucci and Bail Organa in that Senate episode I was talking about. Rex comes back, as I said. We have Commander Cody. So yeah, a lot of characters, and I think for the most part they make sense or they're fairly harmless. So I don't think it really detracts from the viewing experience. But I just thought I should at least mention it, seeing as I talked about it so much in my other videos. Also, another thing that was weird about this season is it seems to forget about the inhibitor chips. The inhibitor chips were a big part of the first season because it's obviously the reason for Order 66, and there was like a whole episode dedicated to the Bad Batch getting it removed. And there was also the reveal at the end of the first season where Crosshair reveals he had his chip removed. Now, it was unclear if he was lying or telling the truth. However, having watched season 2, I can now say we have no new information. It's still unclear because it doesn't come up in this season. So yeah, it's unclear still. It feels like the inhibitor chips were kind of forgotten about. Sort of a bit odd, but I really liked this season. I think it was an improvement on the first season. It had some really, really solid episodes. I mean, it still had some episodes that were not as good, a couple weaker episodes. But overall, it's still a good show. I would still highly recommend it. Now, I do have some unfortunate news. The Bad Batch will be returning for season 3, but they've announced that season 3 will be the last season. So yeah, it looks like we're only going to be getting one more season of this show, which is unfortunate. I feel like they could definitely have continued a bit longer, but I don't know. We'll see what happens in the 3rd season and how they conclude things. We won't know till it comes out. I will, of course, be covering season 3 when it comes out. Also, this will not be the end of my coverage of season 2. When I did season 1, I did a tier list video. I do plan on doing a similar video for this season. However, I think I'm going to be doing it a little bit differently. So keep an eye out for that. I'll be definitely covering it a bit more in the near future. Now, last time I did a tier list, I just ranked everything myself. And I will share my rankings again. However, I also want to hear what you all think. So I'm going to be doing some community posts over the next couple of weeks, asking where you would rank each of the episodes in season 2. So if you want your voice to be heard, be sure to take those polls, and I will share all those rankings in a video at a later date. So yeah, I've definitely got some exciting stuff planned with the Bad Batch season 2. But anyway, that's gonna cover it for this video. I hope you found this review helpful, and I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye.